Hey, even the best companies make mistakes from time to time.
Playing alien music and performing weird experiments.
Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we'll be counting down our picks for the top 10 lame Nintendo-made peripherals and accessories.
You're playing with power. The Nintendo Entertainment System Deluxe set. Batteries not included, Super Mario Bros. And other games sold separately.
For this list, we're taking a look at special peripherals and accessories that were designed by the big N themselves, as opposed to third-party peripherals that were made for Nintendo systems. That means if you were expecting the Power Glove, that was actually made by Mattel, so it doesn't count for this list.
The Power Glove. Everything else is child's play.
Number 10, 64 Double D.
The Nintendo 64 DD would bring the 64 online and provide improved graphics and bigger games.
No product should have Double D in the title unless it wants people to think of large breasts, in which case, great success. At Nintendo, Double D stood for Disk Drive, but it should have stood for Designated Driver, something this project was clearly lacking as development drove way off course repeatedly.
Itadaki!
The magnetic disk drive was ambitious. It promised added storage, rudimentary internet connection for media sharing and online gaming, creative arts-based games, and expansion disks for existing titles. It was also so large that it was nicknamed Bulky Drive, and failed to deliver much of the promised software.
The N64 DD only had, I think, 9 games, and nothing too spectacular.
Launched in Japan in 1999, 15,000 units were sold, 85,000 units were destroyed, and it was discontinued 2 years later. Number 9, 3DS Circle Pad Pro.
As the PSP showed so well, having only one control pad can really hurt a lot of games. But is the Circle Pad Pro really the answer?
In defense of the Circle Pad Pro, it deserves credit for addressing a major shortcoming of the 3DS, the lack of a second circle pad.
Fear not, Nintendo decided to fix this with an accessory. This is the Circle Pad Pro.
It addresses that issue at a reasonable price, with the added bonus of new triggers. Unfortunately, it also turns your 3DS into a bulky monster, seriously undermining the concept of a portable handheld console. You're gonna need to start wearing a fanny pack to carry it around, because your 3DS will no longer fit in any reasonably sized pocket.
I'm kind of impressed, even though it does turn my 3DS into a very, very ugly, cumbersome, unpocket-like device.
Its finish also looks kinda cheap, clashing with the 3DS's sleeker body. This promising peripheral seriously fell short of its potential with lazy design choices. Bottom line though, the 3DS should have launched with a second circle pad built right in.
And of course, the biggest downside is the simple fact that not all games will work with the circle pad. Several new games like Metal Gear Solid and Kid Icarus will, but if you're looking to use this with Ocarina of Time, you're out of luck.
Number 8, GameCube Broadband / Modem Adapter.
This is a really hard to find piece. This is a broadband adapter.
Nintendo failed to successfully bring the internet to the N64 with the 64 Double D, but with the release of the GameCube, they were finally gonna get it right, calling it a top priority.
It didn't take off super well, so now you can pick up these modems for pretty cheap, and they really don't serve much of a purpose.
You have to admire the company. From the Famicom modem to the Satellaview, they were always ambitiously pushing for the integration of an internet connection into their consoles. Sadly, it was not to be. The adapter was sold separately and fit onto a port on the GameCube, but only a handful of games were released that supported the feature, most of which were only released in Japan. Mario Kart Double Dash and Kirby Air Ride supported a LAN connection though, which was kinda cool, I guess.
Unfortunately, some of the games that they tried to make this adapter work for, they didn't kind of follow through very well. One of those happens to be this game here.
Number 7, Wii Fit Balance Board.
Breathe slowly as you maintain your pose.
Over the years, various developers have released titles that encourage gamers to get off the couch and get moving. Unfortunately, most of those are gimmicky and kinda boring, a notable exception being stadium events on the NES.
Let's do it!
The new Power Pad. It's only available in Nintendo's new Power Set. Now you're playing with body power.
Wii Fit is undeniably the most commercially successful attempt at a fitness-based game, but the balance board leaves something to be desired. It generally works well, but is prone to incorrect readings, which is really frustrating if you're using it as a serious exercise tool. As many fitness trainers have pointed out, it's also no substitute for real exercise, regardless of how Nintendo markets it. Nonetheless, over 42 million units have sold, so I guess you can't call it a failure.
That's it. Feel your triceps getting toned. Great, keep it up.
Number 6, Game Boy Camera.
Game Boy, get the camera! Oh yeah!
cool idea, I guess. I mean, who would have thought that you could take photos on your Game Boy? In 1998, Game Boy users around the world proudly declared the future is now and rushed out to buy this accessory. Was it technologically impressive for the time? Sure. In fact, in 1999, it was crowned as the smallest digital camera by the Guinness Book of World Records.
I live with aliens. I can prove it. My Game Boy camera reveals all. They landed on Earth and moved into my house.
But the bundled games were silly, and the photos were terrifying thanks to the limitations of the Game Boy display. Seriously, the portrait pictures kind of look like plot devices from a horror movie.
It's fun to look at yourself as other people do.
And don't forget the Game Boy printer, which let you print these terrible photos on thermal paper.
You can also use the printer to print off special images in certain games like Super Mario Bros. Deluxe or Harvest Moon 2.
Number 5, N64 Voice Recognition Unit.
You've got to see this. I need witnesses. Pikachu, over here. It listens. If only my family would. What?
What do you mean you don't remember the N64 VRU? It was a must-have accessory and took your gameplay experience to a whole new level. Oh wait, that's entirely inaccurate. In fact, it was only ever compatible with 2 titles, Hey You Pikachu, the game that it was packaged with, and Densha to Go 64, a train driving simulator that was only released in Japan. In Hey You Pikachu, it allowed you to interact with your beloved Pokemon using voice commands, but the microphone was poorly designed and more often than not failed to recognize your voice.
Pikachu, come here.
I thought I was man's best friend.
Great job.
The GameCube microphone was a decent improvement, but given that it only worked with 5 or 6 games, it was equally forgettable.
Looks like Luigi. Aw.
Number 4, the Wii Zapper.
Which looks a lot like this.
In the magical world of Wii, your remote can basically be anything you want it to be, thanks to an endless slew of cheap plastic shapes that the remote can fit into.
Now to make these 2 items work together, you're going to need to plug them in, of course. You want to do this before you fill the Wii beer mug, or else it'll spill.
Named after the original NES Zapper light gun, this peripheral has slots for both a remote and a nunchuck, turning them into a single gun-shaped controller. It's a pretty cool design, shaped something like a Tommy gun.
The Wii Zapper is essentially a molded piece of plastic. This is the box. Costs about $25 depending on where you buy it, and comes packed in with an excellent game, Link's Crossbow Training.
And it admittedly looks better than most Wii remote accessories. Unfortunately, the end result is super awkward, and it offered very little, if any, improvement on any sort of shooting game that the standard Wii remote already offered, making it one of the most useless peripherals made by Nintendo.
It's sort of awkward to hold this sometimes if you have big hands, or it's just sort of strange for an adult to hold.
Number 3, Game Boy Advance e-reader.
That's right. It plays cards like the TurboGrafx 16. Except, not at all.
Before Nintendo used Amiibos to unlock new content, they actually tried a similar scheme using trading cards, and the results were less impressive.
Just one of these codes would store 3,360 bytes of information, or, 3 kilobytes.
With this accessory for the Game Boy, players could scan cards to either play retro games or to unlock new content for select GBA titles. However, the classic games required players to scan multiple cards, meaning that if you lost one, you're kinda screwed.
I mean, it's neat, don't get me wrong, this is one of these wacky Nintendo things which was either going to change the world or just be laughable. It's more on the laughable end.
The extra content had an even bigger design flaw, as it required the player to own 2 Game Boy Advance systems and a link cable in order for the game and the reader to communicate with each other. That's a hell of an oversight.
Load up the game on one Game Boy, load up the e-reader on the other, link them together, and then you'd scan the card to unlock the content.
Read error.
Number 2, Super Scope.
This is the correct way to hold and fire the Super Scope.
Do you also love the oversized guns that featured prominently in comics, movies, and video games in the 90s? Are you indifferent to the functionality of the products you buy? If yes, then the Super Scope is the product for you.
Tetris? How about Blasterous?
That's so awful. Marketed as the coolest video game gun ever, it looked more like a shoulder-mounted bazooka that weighed about as much as one too.
This is a big step up from the Zapper. This thing's huge.
Honestly, this thing could knock you the heck over. It also consumed batteries at a staggeringly fast rate, as it required 6 AA's that only lasted about 4 hours. Plus, it required a sensor to be mounted on your TV. That would all be forgivable if it worked well, but it doesn't, and the games that it supported are generally worth about 30 minutes of your time. Number 1, R.O.B, aka R.O.B.
when you master R.O.B, the video robot, and meet the challenge of Gyrobites.
Oh, Nintendo, what were you thinking? Admittedly, every video game company has a few ridiculous accessories to their name, but Nintendo's failures always seem so much weirder than those of the competitors.
Let's play.
Insufficient. Must have gyros.
You want a gyro now?
R.O.B, the Robotic Operating Buddy, an admittedly cute acronym, was an actual robot who connected to your NES. Unfortunately, he wasn't a cybernetic second player, but a Wall-E resembling little guy that was compatible with only 2 games, and corresponded to on-screen flashes much like the NES Zapper.
Down.
Was he a sign of Nintendo's innovative thinking? Yes. Was he also a ridiculous commercial failure with horrible sales and poor reviews? Also yes. Do you agree with our list?
Looking for love here.
What was the worst first-party Nintendo accessory or peripheral you ever made the mistake of putting on your wish list? For more memorable top 10s published every day, be sure to subscribe to WatchMojo.com.
You're swaying a little. Use your core muscles to stabilize yourself.